Good morning. Welcome to episode 147 of the Driller Newscast, our weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling and construction industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy, and this week we have an excellent interview with John Ciovacco, president of Aztech Geothermal LLC and founding board member of the New York Geo Association, co-chair of the New York-GEO Conference panels, and industry advocate and guru. And I'm so excited to jump into this. So I just want us to sit back and enjoy what John's got to offer. And then next week, you better be in Saratoga Springs, New York on Earth Day for our drilling demos that will happen at New York Geo. And then 2 full days of great interaction and conference roundtables. Let's jump right into this. For this week's feature, everybody ought to be in New York next week on Earth Day for the drill demos with the students of BOCES and then on to the New York Geo 2025 conference. And I have the great opportunity today to catch John Ciovacco, who is co-chair of the conference, the mastermind behind all of these roundtables and hurting all of these people from not only New York, but around the world. So I want to jump right into this. John, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you, Brock?
I'm doing great also. Before we jump into NY-GEO 2025, uh, the organization, you've been part of it from the beginning. And we
Yep.
start looking at geothermal as a whole. And yes, we've had some ebbs and flows, but uh, how did you get into geothermal?
Well, career was somewhat roundabout. Started out as a mechanical engineer in aerospace engineering. Got out of engineering for a while and was a head rowing coach at Boston College, which was a completely different thing, but something I went back to from being a rower in college. And then I worked in management consulting for a little while. Did some work with a plastics technology that I purchased from General Electric with a group, and we raised a lot of money. And that was a really exciting startup that I was involved in with a recyclable plastics technology. And then when I moved out of that, I was looking for something in the energy space, and that was maybe around 2006, seven. And that was at a time when oil prices were super high. And I had a friend of a friend who ran an environmental services company called Aztech Environmental. And Aztec Environmental had just put a geothermal system in their building, a standing column geothermal system. And they were interested in starting a geothermal division, which then I came in to start. But it actually didn't turn out to be a division. It turned out to be a separate company that I was in charge of. And so that we started out really, 2008 was when the federal tax credit came around, and the combination of high energy prices that made geothermal more cost effective in some areas, plus state and federal support, more concern for the environment. So those sort of the combination of factors allowed Aztec Geothermal to get started. And then it wasn't until maybe 2014, 15, we started pulling together the NY-GEO conference. It started in Saratoga, actually, where we're returning to. It was Geopalooza, and John Manning put that together, the first Geopalooza. And that was fun. And I played a peripheral role at that time. And then John Manning was exhausted from doing that. And he said, somebody else has to make this happen. And so my company and my involvement as a board member of NY-GEO, we picked up the mantle and we moved the conference to Albany, where it's been for the last bunch of years with a little break with COVID. And then we were down in Brooklyn last October, which was terrific. Back in the capital region of New York. And so in Saratoga, it's the first time in Saratoga, but that's very close to Albany. And then we're back to Brooklyn next year. We're going to be in Brooklyn in March of 2026.
And Brooklyn was a blast for everybody who missed
Of
out
course.
and have FOMO. You better be there in 2026 because we saw some great sites and we had lots of people and it's the state of New York is blazing the way for this. And hopefully we can stop saying blazing and get into wide scale adoption and acceptance.
Indeed.
So you have been doing the um, co-chairing all of the roundtables and presentations for 10 years now, then?
Yeah, yeah. And we decided to do we thought we wanted to pull off two conferences a year. So we've been on kind of a 6 month run, which is kind of, I don't know, exhausting, just to be honest. So we're going back to an annual conference and not trying to do too much. But as a result, um, so this year, the content in Saratoga, we've got 3 tracks over 2 days. And so there's 5 sessions, 5 time slots in the breakouts in those 3 tracks on the first day. And then there's 4 sessions the next day. And yeah, I have been principally shoulder trying to decide on what those tracks should be, really decide on a lot of the session topics, and then invite presenters is mostly what we do that then can fill in our content. So I think about what is NY-GEO, what do our members need, and then I think about what does the geothermal industry need, what kinds of topics do we need to bring to the surface. And it's really fun. It's really fun when it's over. The process getting there can be a little bit much sometimes, but we're in good shape this year. We've got a good lineup of speakers and topics, and looking forward to it.
So taking some time away and becoming a rowing coach and what we need for, the adoption of, heating and cooling, ground source geothermal. When we put these panels together, are you looking for folks that are all going to row together, or do you?
Sometimes not. Sometimes I very purposely put one of the things that I like about the way we run the conference, we have a lot of panels. So we've got moderated panels is the most common thing that we do. And where a call for papers or a call for presentations is a common thing to do, we don't do that. And one of the reasons I don't begrudge people that do that. I almost envy them because they get content kind of dropped in their lap and they just have to decide. But what I like to do is if we have, say, high temperature heat pumps, I like to have 4 manufacturers talk about their kind of hit on that. And as a result, there's 2 good things that come out of that. One is that if someone comes to that presentation, they get 4 different opportunities to make a connection. And then I also like when the presenters don't need to kind of tone down their logos and some of their commercial presence, because I want them to be a resource for those people that came there. And sometimes if you decommercialize it too much, you don't really understand as an attendee how to access those resources. We have a session on in this year's conference on the building load side distribution. So how do we get heating and cooling out to the building on that side of the heat pump? So not on the source side, the geothermal side, but on the distribution side. And so we'll have someone talk about refrigerant distribution, like a VRF system, water source VRF. We'll have somebody talk about hydronic distribution. We'll have someone talk about that 6-pipe system where you can kind of mix the source with that load side, and the source becomes the load side in the 6-pipe. And if you don't know what that means, maybe come to the session. And then we'll have someone talk about distributed heat pumps, which is a common form where we'll have heat pumps maybe in different parts of the building, and that's how we distribute it. And each of those are from different companies, and then we'll be representing a different aspect of the technology. I want them to have logos. I want them to be a resource for that type of distribution for the attendees. And the other thing that's nice that we've really pushed hard and have had good success with is we like to have visual presentations. So those 4 presentations will be a few slides and they'll all come in series. And then we'll record the session, which will be available on YouTube. So whatever is up on the screen and whatever is said into a microphone gets recorded and can be listened to again. And then the slides are available for download. And so I always feel like we create like a treasure trove of information. It also gives whenever you have a multi-track thing, there's always conflicts. There's always, I wish I could be in 2 places if you're a real industry person. But this gives people the opportunity to either download the slides and or listen to that session at a later date, or people that don't go. We try to be very open about it. There's been some discussion, should we charge for that content? And I think there's so many free resources, not unlike the resources that you put up, and even this webcast, is that I want it to be accessible to people, and we really appreciate our sponsors and our attendees and our exhibitors who support the financial aspects of the NY-GEO, the organization, and the conference. But the content, I really want that to be very accessible to people, and so we've had a good run with that, I think.
From an accessibility standpoint, one thing that I really enjoy about from Albany to Brooklyn to now Saratoga Springs, uh, there's a wide cross section of people coming to the conference. And I feel like I've been sitting in rooms in different parts of the country or world trying to talk about geothermal, and everybody in there is doing this because we all agree with each other. And I feel like the person that we needed in there wasn't drug into the room. And I really like how does NY-GEO do that, bringing in so many different folks?
Yeah, I think that some of it is just luck, because we're in a state that has established laws, and those laws, those policies that then turn into laws, the implementation of those has really implicated geothermal as a key technology. And so we've got a big state university system that needs to decarbonize. We have a program called Lead by Example that we're talking about. So the state organizations and municipalities are supposed to follow the climate law that to decrease carbon, to decrease their energy usage, and to really score big points with that. Geothermal is a central piece of that. So we see a lot of those. So that'll bring those are stakeholders that purchase things. So if we'll get a lot of state agency folks from the Parks Department, from the Department of Environmental Conservation, from the SUNY Albany campuses, the state university campuses, and they have buildings. They have lots of buildings, and that Lead by Example program will really emphasize that. The other thing is that we've got a lot of really, really strong environmental stakeholder groups that have been supportive of decarbonization in general, electrification of buildings. And we have had a really nice dialogue with those groups, and we work together on many things. And so when you walk the halls, there's lots of those folks there. And then the utilities have needed to engage. Our state energy organization, NYSERDA, has pushed the rebate programs out to the utilities. The utilities now have geothermal rebate programs. And so that's forced the utilities to be engaged. So we have the utilities, we have the environmental stakeholders, we have the state agency folks, and then just private developers, especially downstate. You've got a lot of development going on. So that was a nice aspect of that conference. The other thing that I think is kind of cool is that we, as a lot of these technical conferences tends to be a lot of dudes. And we have I think a really good mix. And I think a lot of that is the environmental stakeholder groups have more women. The utilities have probably proportional women, but they have a lot of women that are in there. So it isn't if you go to a drilling conference, not that there aren't women engaged in those, and key women that we both know about, but we do look to try to do our best to get those voices up on stage too, and to try to make sure. The group Heat out in Boston, very involved in thermal energy networks, they have a session. The building decarbonization folks, they have a session. A lot, and then again, a lot of strong voices that are women, and it's really been a nice feature of our conference. I think noticeable to people that go to most sort of technical or geothermal conferences.
It's it's great when you look at New York and all the initiatives, and then just straight north. Massachusetts is also, doing, lots of initiatives, and we see crossover. I see you working up in Mass. You're part of the advisory board for Heat. And one of the keynote speakers this year is the opposite of our Corey in New York for
Right, right. Yeah.
Massachusetts.
So we would typically have the chair of the Public Service Commission in New York, the PSC, would be a speaker at our conference commonly for many years, even through three different ones over time. So that's great. The very high level energy person, of course, but he couldn't make it this year. Rory Christian couldn't make it. And so I asked him if it would be okay if I invited the chair of the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts, which is very involved in thermal energy networks. They have some thoughts about trying to merge the gas and electric rate bases, because if we're doing a lot of thermal investments, but that benefits the electric grid, maybe those rate bases should be merged somewhat. I'm just going to reset my camera. And so it's that kind of thinking that Jamie Van Nostrand will bring from Massachusetts. And I asked permission from our chair of the Public Service Commission, because you don't want to bring the head regulator from another state into your state conference without permission. So we were granted permission. And then we actually have one of the relatively new and young, kind of a superstar, Radina Volova is our one of our new commissioners on the Public Service Commission. Not the chair, but a commissioner. And she is speaking at dinner, and she's going to do some interactive stuff as well during that session, which I think is going to be fun. I said, it's not very commissioner-like of you. And she said, well, things have got to change. So I'm looking forward to her participation as well. And then during the sessions, the first day we've got a track on thermal energy networks, and that's very much in New York, driven by the Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act. So those are the investor-owned utilities that are engaged in these really district geothermal or network geothermal projects. But then there's also going to be content that covers campuses and things like that. We're going to talk about modeling tools, because the utilities are saying, okay, if I have to design this system someday, how do I model it? They know how to model a gas system or an electric system. So we're going to do have some conversation about that. We've got a building electrification track. That's a little bit of a catch-all for lots of topics, but that's where we'll have a Geothermal 101 by Jay Egg, which is always terrific. We've got the GeoStar top jobs, where there's going to be 3 categories of winners for geothermal installations that have these different characteristics. The awards will be at the dinner. That load side distribution that I talked about is in there. We're even going to have Kathy Hanoun, who is the founder and president of Dandelion, talk about a comparison of state, across many states, of state incentive programs, and which are the easiest to use, which are the most effective, which are the least effective. And she's got a cute title of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I saw a version of that presentation, and she's adapted it for us, which I think is going to be fun. On day 2, we start out a little bit more on the federal side, because that's on people's minds. Federal tax credits are a big driver in our industry. And so we've got Representative Paul Tonko, U.S. Representative from New York, which Saratoga is in his district. And so he'll certainly have he had a lot to do with the development of the IRA, and has helped out with implementation. And then we'll have a big panel on the change in the administration, the geo industries, impacts and actions. And we'll have Venetia Lannon, who is Vice President Con Edison and a board member of NY-GEO, facilitating Ryan Dougherty of the Geo Exchange, John Thomas of Water Furnace, Colette Gagnet from ID Bailey, which is a consulting firm around IRA tax advisory, and Brock Yordy. So I think that'll be a strong start to day 2, because it's on everybody's mind. And I figured going in, like, people would say, well, what are they going to talk about? I go, whatever is appropriate at that very moment in time. You put people up who are following the industry, and they'll have a take. So I'm really looking forward to that. We then have 3 tracks on day 2, one on geothermal heat exchanger. And that's, again, kind of a mix of topics. We're talking about drilling regulations, which are big deal in New York State, that are ever changing. We're kind of between trapezes right now. We eliminated some of the bad regulation, but we don't have the new regulation yet. But I'm looking forward to getting an update on that. We're going to talk about borehole quality assurance. We've got some stuff about heat recovery and thermal storage, which we haven't brought to the stage for a while. And then we're going to have Brock actually is moderating a panel on geothermal drilling from around the world, and some different folks around the world that will talk about some of the different things that are out there. I've been collecting this over time, and I know you do as well. But it's there's some stuff that happens out there that when I talk to people about it in the United States, they go, "No, that doesn't really happen." And that's your session. Your session is does that no? Is that really what they do? So that'll be fun. Lots of stuff on policy in the center track, and then we've got a really cool track, 4 sessions on heat pumps in the grid. A lot of the benefits that we think are the sustainable benefits that'll drive this technology to scale is the electric benefits. So lower peak demand, better utilization of the grid assets, and then those are monetizable, like those are of value. And how do we bring that value back to making the investments that created that value? And so there'll be 4 sessions that focus on different aspects of how to make that promise in some ways. We've always said, hey, if we electrify, the DOE has said, if we electrify with geothermal, it won't have negative grid impacts. But how do we get over that first cost? How are we going to pay for that ground heat exchanger that we know has monetizable benefits, but those monetizable benefits right now are going somewhere else? So that'll be an exciting set of 4 sessions, I think.
So in 10 years of this conference evolving from Geopalooza to where it is today, and the big push of thermal energy networks, and us looking at modeling and feasibility, because we do have some slowdown when we're looking at these bigger networks and feasibility, and just being sure that if the day after tomorrow type movie series happens, is everybody going to freeze or what? What do you think in the next 10 years with New York Geo and the state of New York? Where do you think we'll be?
Yeah, I think that I think the investor-owned utilities will be unfortunately slow off the mark because of regulation and because of the natural conflict of we have gas assets, those are making money. There's always this, it's how do we make it so that it's attractive for them to move into this business and give them a business model that's attractive? And we don't really have that yet. But in the meantime, we do have, I think, the campuses. I think about, say, if the IRA was to be completely repealed, which I don't anticipate it would be, but if it was, there's still so much important geothermal work to be done in New York State, just based on our own climate laws and based on the leading by example through our state agencies and our municipal buildings. We're involved in many projects that are completely indifferent to the tax credit, and I think we might end up needing to lean on those in the next period. But I do think that, and then I think that'll give the utilities in some ways time to catch up, or private thermal energy network models, which were on display at a recent Department of Public Service meeting. I do think we need to do this in groups, in clusters, in neighborhoods, in communities, and to do the onesies and twosies. I mean, my company, we've done, I don't know, maybe 650 single family homes. It's lovely. I feel proud of that. But now I'm involved in big multifamily projects and large municipal and state buildings and things that really leverage, and we work with 8 utilities to help them in their thermal energy network path of sorts. But we really need to, those of us that are in the industry and that have the experience, we need to figure out ways to leverage ourselves so that we can achieve the scale that we need. And I do think we need to do it. We need to do it in clusters, and you do it in bunches, And I think we're lucky in states like New York, Massachusetts, a few others that have state policies that I think will keep that going almost regardless of what happens in Washington.
Yeah, I wish every state had a nicer, that's pretty cool.
Indeed, yeah, we've got a nice mix of things. I know NY-GEO does. I think we do a nice job. I think our organization does a nice job, but we also have the wind at our back, and we don't miss that. But we also take advantage of it, and we try to keep that wheel spinning as fast as we can to try to get this to scale.
So, last question of the day, your elevator pitch for those outside of the state of New York to come to NY-GEO.
Well, one of the things that's cool about NY-GEO is it's not NY-GEO. I think anybody who comes to it thinking it's a state conference, it doesn't feel anything like a state conference. It feels all the national and international that you might get from an International Ground Source Heat Pump Association conference or some of the other conferences I've been to around the world. We really try to bring in the best information that's available in the industry, really, and try to bring in. I very purposely bring in perspectives from outside of New York because we could just turn on ourselves and not grow at all. And like the panel that you're doing on drilling from around the world, I even get criticized sometimes, like if we bring in, say, a heat pump technology that we introduce that isn't commercially available to New York or even the United States. But I think that we need to open people's minds up. And so I think if somebody wants to come and see some unique content, they want to see several perspectives on any individual thing and come away with lots of resources. I mean, we really, and then it's all recorded. So like you don't need to take notes, just sit and listen, ask good questions, and the resources will be there when it's all over.
And it's a great time. Every day at the end, you can find somebody to grab a cup of coffee with or a different type of drink and toast, and we're collaborating, and it goes into the evenings. And I I feel like it's a great collaboration of peers and just everybody sharing. Sure, there's some point counterpoint things that happen, but it is I've enjoyed the classes, the lunch, the dinner, and then the after time as I see you or Jens or Kevin Moravik or many of the board members are out there still having these great discussions that we couldn't have during the day. So I feel like that's part of the core is just everybody's open and welcoming of just let's have a conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the pre-conference stuff will be really fun this year. We did some tours in New York, site tours, which were very successful, aside from no place to go to the bathroom and no place to eat. So we solved that. Christine Hoffer, executive director, there's bathrooms on those buses and there's box lunches. So don't be afraid, anyone. Tour is going to go great. And then the drilling demonstrations, I think, to go out there in the morning, take a look at some real activity that's going on, get a real feel for the scale and scope and noise and some of the things that a lot of people I think miss if they're not in the field. And then to go on some wonderful site tours and then come back and maybe see a finishing operation. So we're drilling in the morning and grouting when you come back later. I think that's I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a real feature of this conference, and I hope going forward. I think that people want that touchy feely stuff. Kind of a lot of us are visual learners, and that experience is really something you can't duplicate in the classroom.
And the interaction with the BOCE students, these
So
young
great.
construction future professionals, is going to be just fun to be right there and have an aha moment when they look at something a little bit differently than we have on a job site before.
Yeah, yeah, it's just great. Really looking forward to that. And it's going to sound bad. Really looking forward to it being over because it's very very stressful going in. And I always say to people, it's not a good time. Like people say, hey, we'll grab a cup of coffee or maybe go out to dinner, and that is a hard no. Not that I wouldn't love to do that with everyone, but just trying to keep the three ring circus going.
And that's a perfect place to wrap. I appreciate your time today. And yeah, it's a big lift, and we thank you and the rest of the chairs and the board for putting on a great conference year after year after year.
Yeah, well, we love having you and Chelsea and the support that you're bringing with the program. A great addition. It also disciplines us to get our materials in 3 weeks earlier than I would, but it makes a better conference. It makes a better conference in many ways. Not only having the printed program, but also that I have to nail some stuff down that I normally would slack on. So nice. All
Well, I appreciate your time today. Thanks, John.
right, Brock, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for episode 147. Get to New York. There's so much happening. Just like John said, it's from people across the country and around the world. We're talking about innovations. We're advocating for new technologies. We're advocating for best practices. We're having the hard discussions that need to be had. And it's just such a great community to be part of. The Driller team will be on site. We will be covering panels. We will be part of the drill day. We will be out having interviews and stories and having great discussions about how we shift from adoption of geothermal projects to wide scale acceptance for thermal energy networks, for decarbonization, for big projects, little projects, everything that needs to happen. I can't wait to see you next week. It's going to be an excellent week. Again, check out thedriller.com. There are lots of news pieces we need to get to next week, including the sunsetting of environmental regulations. This is a big deal for us industry. Talking about the elimination of low flow shower heads, 2.5 gallons per minute. We have some environmental impacts and changes to the drilling industry that next week is going to be a deep dive into the news that's impacting our industry. And I want you to start thinking about it now because many of our states across the country are still in drought conditions. We just refuse to tell Mexico what they should be doing for water as we didn't allot them their 1.5 million acre feet that we give them out of the Colorado, which we've covered several times saying that we are not doing this right now, to the 1.75 million acre feet of water that Mexico owes us into the Rio Grande that they are supposed to allot every 5 years. Drillers, we are drilling professionals. We are groundwater professionals, geothermal professionals, construction drilling professionals. I want you to start thinking from a state and local level how these things impact you. Of course, we have our national level and what's happening, but our states drive what's important for our watershed, for our groundwater protection, for our environmental protection, for our air quality. All of these are very important for you and your community. Start thinking about them now. Have a great week.